Yeah, it's like
Okay, hello everyone. Let's get started. So it's really good to see so many of you here in the room and also online. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Patrick Meehan and I teach in HCRI. For those who are in second or third year undergraduate, you will know me. And I'm a lecturer in peace and conflict studies here. I also work on the sort of employability careers event side along with Andrew. And that's kind of my capacity here today. So I'm really happy to welcome you here to this event, which is hopefully going to give you a taster and some really useful advice about careers in the humanitarian and emergency response sectors. And I think the key aim that really kind of underpinned our thinking of putting this event together was really to focus on giving you some insights into what recent alumni from HCRI, where their careers have taken them after finishing their studies here, and hopefully providing some useful, quite practical insights on kind of first next steps once they finished at university, to give you some kind of guidance and advice on how you navigate that kind of quite tricky steps sometimes after finishing university and thinking, how do you embark on a career in these sectors? And that will be the first session that we have, and I will introduce our amazing speakers on that in just a moment. We will then have a coffee and cake break after the first session, and then the second session we have a number of speakers who are predominantly coming from kind of HR recruitment side of this sector, and I think will provide some really useful advice of what it looks like from their side when they receive a lot of job applications for the different jobs they're applying for, and will give you some useful tips and advice from their perspective on maybe some sort of do's and don'ts on how you navigate that employment kind of process. And just a quick comment about the second session. Unfortunately, Greg Moores, who was meant to be joining us today from MSF, has been unable to come today due to kind of ill health today, just let us know. So unfortunately, he won't be joining us, but I'm really pleased to say that Hanan, who is the president of the HCRI Society, will also be joining the panel to give some really useful guidance on the different kinds of roles that are available within the humanitarian sector, and to also give some advice on kind of how to navigate the recruitment process for that. So that's the sort of order of the day as we're going to go through the event this afternoon. So as we move on to the first session, which is really all about hearing from a number of past or present members of HCRI, and to get some of their kind of insights and perspectives from their own kind of career pathways. So we have 4 speakers in this first session. So we're going to begin in a minute with Ahmed, who is a PhD candidate at HCRI and a humanitarian aid worker with more than a decade of experience, mostly with MSF, who has completed missions across Africa, the Middle East and the Caribbean. We will then move to Hannah, who has kindly joined us online. Hannah Cameron Ross, who is an emergency planning officer at Highland Council and a recent HCRI alumni. And Highland Council is the local government authority responsible for delivering public services, local development and governance across the Highland region of Scotland. We'll then move on to Nieve Boaden, who is an emergency preparedness, resilience and response officer in Manchester University NHS Foundation Trust, covering multiple hospitals and care organisations, and is also a recent HCRI alumni. And then last but not least, we'll move on to Dr. Ümit Seven, who is a Marie Curie postdoctoral fellow at HCRI, whose research explores how host states respond to international humanitarian assistance. He holds a doctorate from the Middle East Technical University in Ankara in Turkey, and has worked with the UN World Food Programme and UN Development Programme in Turkey. So the way we will order this session is I will pass over to each of those speakers in turn, who have prepared some short reflections, and we will take each speaker in turn, and then we will open it up for questions. And yeah, if you have questions, it'd be great if you could just very briefly introduce who you are for the speakers before then setting out your question. So without further ado, I'll pass over to you, Ahmed.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I hope that you have really energetic day and with a lot of passion and compassion in the humanitarian sector. Well, so my name is Ahmed, and I have been like working in the humanitarian field since almost 2012.
Sorry, I can't hear you from the back. I don't want to be mic.
Just speaking louder, that's not the microphone.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Good. Well, so I started my career journey since 2012. At the moment, so I'm almost finishing my PhD in migration. Like in my last few weeks, hopefully I will finish. But going back to the start, so my beginning was after my undergrad, and I changed the career a lot of time. So my undergrad was in pharmacy. So I'm a pharmacist, supposed to be a pharmacist. I did work in the pharmaceutical sector for maybe one year or something in my country, but I really didn't like it that much. And then I decided to change. And because of this career change, I decided like to explore different opportunity. I started to read about the humanitarian field, the different humanitarian mission that is happening worldwide. And then I found myself interested in this career. And then the first step that I did, because my undergrad was not like the majority of you, like I didn't have like humanitarian degree or something. So the first thing that I did, I started to learn myself, like to acquire some knowledge about humanitarian principle, about the different conflict that is happening worldwide, about like humanitarian access, just to have this knowledge. And also the other step that I did at this time was a kind of trying to connect with different humanitarian workers that even I don't know in my country, like through friends, through LinkedIn, for example. So I start to speak with them to understand their experience, to understand how they enter the career and why. And then after I decided to apply. And fortunately, I found a fixed term post in MSF as a pharmacist at this time. So it was like for 7 months. It was in my home country. I went there, and then they evaluated me based on my knowledge in the humanitarian sector. I mean, like theoretical knowledge. And also I was doing some voluntary work in a small scale, like with charities. It's not like a paid work, but it's like completely voluntary and for free. And this was actually the point that they were interested in. They did like my profile because of that. And then they accepted me for this 7 months. The project was almost like for me as first step in my career rather than an income generating job or opportunities. At the end of the day, actually, the project was far from my home country, so I had to rent accommodation to pay the expenses myself. So at the end of the month, I didn't really have saving in my pocket. It was almost zero, but it was really a good step. I finished my contract after that, and then I like tried to see if there is opportunity to go abroad, to have like a humanitarian mission abroad. And the next step was for me to search for a national organization, very small national organization in my country that may have like some humanitarian mission in some humanitarian crisis zone. And at this time, there was different option. And like around 2012 and 13, I was trying like to explore what is happening worldwide, to see which mission really can be an added value for me in my CV and my career. And around 2012 and 13, the trend was like either Afghanistan or Somalia. basically. It was the most toughest humanitarian crisis at this time. And then I said, okay, if I can find an opportunity in these two countries, it will be great in my career. And fortunately, I found an Egyptian small organization that has like a small project in Somalia. I went there. I start another career in a program management, and I managed to educate myself about program management before applying to this organization. I went there for a few months in Somalia. It was almost 10 months, but it was really nice exposure. It was really like you are in the middle of armed conflict. You are in the middle of negotiating access. You are in the middle of delivering like project with budget of 5 million a year. So it was really, I was lucky for that. My mission ended, but then I decided to go back to MSF if there is opportunity, but outside my country. I did apply. They found myself having international experience, and I did work for them before for 7 months. So they did accept my application, and I'm grateful for that. And since then, I started to go for MSF for different missions, different countries. I have been in Sudan, South Sudan, Tanzania, Cameroon, Haiti, Lebanon, Niger, so in different profile. And in the middle of my career, also I felt like I need to equip myself more in the humanitarian sector about what is happening, about the trend, about the new knowledge. And then like in the middle of the 12-year experience, I decided to take a break to start a master's degree. My master's degree was not from HCRI, but it was from Geneva, but it's similar. So I took like a rest for 1 year, finished my master, went back again, continue working. And then I decided to take another break to go for another education. And that's why I'm here doing the PhD. That is basically my journey in the humanitarian sector. And if I could say like to what extent the degree is relevant to the humanitarian field, I could say it's really important because on my second half of my experience, I felt like I gained more power in terms of knowledge. So like in the organization, when someone start to have a debate with me regarding humanitarian access, humanitarian principle, negotiating with armed group, compromise or make a red line between staff security and operational activity, I can really put my weight and I can be really have independent way of thinking. I didn't that much profit from the career progress because of the degree, because my degree was in the middle really. But if it was in the beginning, I could probably there would be some career progress like climbing the ladder or something. Having said that, if I can end my presentation with just a small advice, probably it's not going to be the best advice for someone starting the undergrad or finishing the undergrad in humanitarian studies, but considering what is happening nowadays, especially the humanitarian space issue, the violation of IHL, the power dynamic in the Security Council, and the new power that is happening worldwide, I feel like it's really important not to limit yourself to the humanitarian field. Because even if we go back by time when the humanitarian field started, so we have the first one, Henry Dunant, ICRC. He was actually a businessman. He wanted to lend some rand from Napoleon before starting the ICRC. The journalist and doctor that went to Nigeria, Biafra to start MSF, they were actually working home as doctor and journalist. So I would say like humanitarian field could be an option, but not the only option that you should consider. Especially nowadays. You can continue in the humanitarian work book it in your pocket. If there is opportunity, use the opportunity from your pocket. If there is no other opportunity, find another, create your other option. Okay. Do I have time?
Maybe just one more minute and then.
Well, that's that, and probably there will be some transferable skills that we can talk about it later, but this was my last advice.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We'll now pass over to Hannah, who's coming in online. So I'll pass the floor over to you, Hannah.
Fab. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Great. So hi, everybody. I'm Hannah. I'm an emergency planning officer with the Highland Council. I completed my undergraduate degree in IDMHR in 2023. In my program, I think some of the specific things that are relevant to the conversation we're having today is I did do the professional experience project. So I worked with Salve International for a few months in my second year. I also spent my third year, I had some free time, surprisingly, on a Thursday where I didn't have classes for a few months. So I spent some time volunteering with Action for Humanity in Salford. And then I got a student experience internship with the university between my second and third year with UK Med. So I did 8 weeks full time as an experience project with them. Alongside that, I've been volunteering with React Disaster Response since 2021, and I've done a handful of deployments with them. So just as a background, there's a bit of volunteering experience as well as the educational background that I've come from through HCRI. I suppose when I finished my undergraduate degree, initially I really wasn't sure what I wanted to go into straight after. And I was really hesitant to put myself forward for a graduate scheme or something similar because I didn't want to rush into a big commitment, a 2-3 year commitment that I didn't know was right for me. Equally, I didn't want to run into a master's because I didn't know what I wanted to do straight after university. So I decided for that first year after university that I'd focus on just finding a somewhat relevant part-time job to continue pursuing as much volunteering in the sector as I could. So I ended up securing a job as a community support worker in my local branch of the British Red Cross. Although this wasn't a disaster management focused role, it was pretty ideal for me as it was a recognizable organization in the sector, but it was also flexible in terms of my shifts, which allowed me to look for volunteering opportunities. So I spent a year working with them and volunteering. And in that time, I also had my first overseas deployment with React. So I went out to post-earthquake Morocco. Since then, I've also had a couple of other deployments. And this time last year, I was in Ukraine doing some work in the amber zone, so about 2 kilometers out from the front line, doing some work teaching civilians about sort of first aid kind of stuff. So towards the end of that year, I'd obviously built up a little bit of experience within the sector, but also had some opportunities to do some stuff overseas. But my current role in emergency planning popped up in my local authority area. I knew that this was a role immediately that I would be interested in, just looking at the job description. And I was aware that I actually didn't meet any of the criteria in the job description whatsoever. They were looking for somebody with a huge amount of experience. So what I did was I reached out to my now boss to ask if I could do an internship or some shadowing within the department to build up skills for future positions that might be available. But he advised me to put in an application anyway. He said that aptitude and enthusiasm counted for a lot. And also, he thought that the interview experience itself would be a valuable experience regardless of the outcome. So that experience involved doing a presentation in front of a couple of senior members of the council. And 2 years later, I'm still here. So I'm really grateful that I got the opportunity to put myself out there, even though it wasn't something that I was traditionally qualified for as such. I think, as we all know, there are not a plethora of entry-level positions in the emergency response or the humanitarian sector worlds. In emergency planning, specific qualifications are competitive and also quite expensive. And the majority of people, in my experience, that work in emergency planning fields are actually second careers. So they're ex-emergency services, they're ex-military, they've got a huge amount of experience to draw upon, and they are the people that are targeted for these sorts of roles. Having said that, I think for that reason, my undergraduate degree in disaster management helped open a few doors and helped me stand out from the crowd as someone from a younger background, a younger demographic, with knowledge that actually paralleled that of someone with much more experience in the sector. And I haven't actually stopped learning since I graduated. I don't think we ever do, but whether that be from courses I've done through volunteering with React, from work related CPD through the UK Resilience Academy, or I'm actually doing my master's part-time through UOM at the moment. So I'm doing my master's in public health part-time via distance learning through the university. So every single piece of education, I think for me has had relevance and has been a step in building myself into a more comprehensive practitioner in the field. I think crisis management as a sector, whether that be humanitarian or national based, it's incredibly broad. But the people that actually get the opportunities are those that have quite a defined niche that adds value in the sector, in my experience. So my advice would be that the most strategic move is to build a specialist skill that the sector struggles to fill. So, for example, is that getting experience in logistics or in information management? GIS is becoming more and more of a thing. I mean, we've had the largest wildfire ever recorded in Scotland last year, and there was a huge amount of data that was going into mapping on the GIS side of things. Security risk management or wilderness and remote medicine. So a lot of the stuff that I've done in the more medical side of things has actually opened doors for me for volunteering overseas. I think niche skills open doors, even when the wider job market is quite tight. And we understand that there aren't many jobs and there's a huge amount of competition for them. For affordable training and volunteering, I think it's about targeted choices. So there's lots of online platforms, I think, but the one that comes to mind for me was Kaya. I think the Humanitarian Leadership Academy's online platform has a lot of well-recognized free courses that are a good way to build foundational skills. And local resilience volunteering in the UK can be a really solid start. Obviously, my first proper job out of uni was actually just doing community support work with the Red Cross. I think that can be a solid start if you focus on roles with actual responsibility and learning attached rather than just being a name on a list somewhere. I think people, my perspective has been that organizations are looking beyond academic qualifications, obviously, but they really do look for a personal interest outside of the academic qualification or the workplace. So getting yourself across in a room with those sorts of skills are going to be incredibly valuable. Yeah, I feel like that's my overview for you. Hopefully that's enough.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Hannah. Brilliant. We'll now pass over to Nieve.
Sorry, I've been sat out the way. I've been dealing with something at work. But it's often going to be the case that I'll start off, but it's often going to be the case that you're going to set your mind to something, and no matter what role you go into, if it's anything to do with humanitarian aid, emergency planning, your day is always going to be derailed. And I think that's one thing, if I can make you take anything away from today, it's to try and be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I know that might not make any sense, but a key skill that can't be taught, you can practice, but nobody else can teach you, is that self-resilience. I think everybody here has all experienced COVID through various different routes, various different experiences, but we've all gone through that national crisis, okay? And that personal resilience, nobody can take that away from you, but it's about building on that and how you use that going forward. I mean, I feel like I skipped a bit, so if we just go back, My name's Nieve Boaden. I am currently one of the Emergency Preparedness, Resilience and Response Officers at Manchester University NHS Foundation Trust. So a bit of my background, I was the same year as Hannah at university, and I did a slightly different route. So I honestly only came to university because of COVID. I was meant to go to Nepal. I had an internship over there for WASH. I thought my life was a bit planned out, and I thought this is exactly what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to go. But that got derailed. So ended up coming to uni, did the HCRI IDMHR course. And throughout that process, it was something that I thought had to be done. I thought that I had to come to university to get that education because that was the norm. That was the route that a lot of people took. And I think the current sector is being professionalized, so it is really useful to have that degree to your name. But I think the soft skills that you learn here is something that's always going to be with you. We forget about essays that we write. We forget about some of, apologies to the lecturers, but we forget about some of our lecturers when we move on. But it's the soft skills of actually finding solutions to a problem, whether that be an essay or group projects, that actually will help us in the real world going forward. So during my time at university, like I said, it wasn't something that I thought that I was going to do. I did actually have a hard time. And a lot of you might relate, a lot of you might not relate. The amount of hours that me and a few of my friends from the year spent in the library getting so stressed out, looking at each other in a funny way and start to cry because we're just getting overwhelmed with the situation. I think it's really normal to feel that way and to get overwhelmed. And if I could tell you how many times I thought about dropping out, I would be a millionaire, to be honest. But that perseverance is going to help you throughout life. University isn't for everybody, but you're all here, all at different stages, and you are stronger than you think, and you will get through it no matter how much of a hard time that you may be having, or you may be loving it and it may be easy for you. But it was just a bit of reassurance for those. But during my third year, because uni wasn't my first plan, I decided to do a placement. So I did a placement as a student emergency preparedness, resilience and response officer, so EPRR in short. I moved down to Kent. I'm sort of local, I'm from the Wirral, but I decided to move down to Kent and I did a year's experience. And that is one of the best things that I ever could have done. It exposed me to so many new things in terms of business continuity. So actually working in a hospital, what would you do if all the power got cut out? We can't just say, right, everybody go home, we can't care for you anymore. How are we continuing that business as usual processes? Things such as lockdown, again, something that was happening regularly during COVID, or a lot of events and incidents that happened locally, obviously Manchester Arena, what that looked like for local organisations and partnerships. Again, CBRN, so chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear. A lot of the hospitals have to have training for that. So a big part of this job, yes, there are elements of writing plans, and that might not be your forte, that might not be what you enjoy, but there are so many other elements as well. You're delivering training, you may be running exercises, and I think being exposed to that environment makes you so much more confident in yourself. If you asked me a couple of years ago if I would have come back to one of these events that I actually attended as a student to actually talk, I would have told you that absolutely would not be the case. So I think it's just about opening yourself up to those opportunities. So after that student placement, I came back to uni, did my final year, and I actually linked my dissertation to something that I learned over that year. So I ended up doing my dissertation on chemical incident response within the UK and how vulnerable people are not accounted for in that response. So I linked that placement back to the degree subject. And once I finished the degree, it turned out that the hospital that I did my placement in, that a job opportunity came up, and I applied for that and ended up getting that. I worked there for 18 months to 2 years, and then a job came available, so I moved back up north. So in terms of that, really, it's something that I never thought that I could see myself doing. I was always adamant that I'm going to go into the humanitarian sector. This is what I want to do. I want to help. And I know for people doing this course and wanting to go into that sector, that is innate within us. We want to help. We want to be able to do that for whether it's people, whether it's animals, whether it's a state or a company. It's about how we can continue to learn and develop those skills until we get to that final point. I think a few of the speakers today have already mentioned that it isn't a sector that's very easy to get into. So I would say, even if it's something that you can't 100% see yourself doing, put yourself forward for that opportunity, because it might be completely different to what you think. The NHS is obviously, we know, is a great thing that we have in the UK, and it does have its challenges, but you are still helping, you are still providing that resilience in terms of that disaster management, that incident response. And it's not just one career, it's very different across the board. Different hospitals do it completely different. Private sectors, every single organisation needs to have an element of resiliency. So yes, I know that a lot of people think, oh, I want to go down the charity route. To be honest, eventually that's the route that I would like to pick up and I would like to move on. But I think we can't just stand still. We need to keep on moving and actually take the opportunities that are presented to us. And this was the opportunity that presented to me. And I'm now, 3 and a bit years down the line, and I'm the lead EPRR officer for 4 hospitals and community services within that trust specifically, because it is such a massive trust. And I could never have seen myself doing that. So I'd say if I could give you any advice today is, I know it's a bit poor, it's very hard to get into this sector. And I know it's really useful hearing from a variation of speakers. Some people who have got into this decades ago when it was a different time. It was a different time just before COVID. It was a different time just after COVID. And it's a different time now. But it's about putting yourself forward to any opportunities. LinkedIn, I know everybody mentions it, and sometimes it's a bit cringy putting posts on there. I was one who was a bit against it, and I thought, oh gosh, no, it's another social media. I don't want to be doing that. But actually, reaching out to people helps you expand your circle. I mean, just a couple examples off the top of my head. There was another girl who was on the course a couple of years above me, saw my sort of account, reached out to me, and I went through the job application process. She ended up going forward and getting a job doing EPRR with the police. So I'd say it's really good to look on these systems and social media that we have available to us and reach out to people. If they're too busy or they don't want to answer, they won't answer. But let's be honest, everybody's been rejected at some point or not answered to, okay? So I'd say put yourself out there and try to be comfortable in that uncomfortableness. I think that's a bit of a summary. Is that okay?
Yeah, continue. We'll now move on to our final speaker before we open up to Q&A, which is Ümit.
Thanks, Patrick. But I think it does work. Should I take the microphone?
Oh, yes, sorry.
But I think it's not working.
There we go.
Thanks, Patrick and Andrew, for giving me this opportunity. In the next 5-7 minutes, I would like to focus on 4 different factors, I would say, that might be very influential in the trajectory of my own professional life. So I started my humanitarian work back then in 2015. I was studying in peace and conflict studies in Istanbul. So this was some sort of a influential in the sense that I want to do something more meaningful. And I decided that first I need to understand what's going on around the world in terms of peace and war. And during this time, there was a crisis in Syria unfolding before the eyes of the world. And in 2015, there was almost 1 million asylum seekers at the gates of the EU. So there was some sort of a need to respond to this kind of a humanitarian crisis. And even though I had some sort of a teaching assistant position, and I thought that this would be such a great opportunity, especially in Turkey, I knew that they were expanding their operations, and I applied this position in a city close to Syria as well. So my first point that I would like to highlight is that education. So I was following peace and security studies, which was very much, I would say, aligned with the job that I applied at this time. So I got the position. It was with World Food Program. So basically, what I was doing is that I was following the developments in the northern part of Syria, mostly because we were doing some sort of cross-border operations. But it was also established by the United Nations Security Council mission, meaning that we were sending food assistance to the northern part of Syria, which was held at this time opposition. And then we were ensuring that all these tracks consist only humanitarian food or like nothing beyond this as well. So we were working with some other agencies as well. And the second thing that I would like to highlight is that, because I think it's also some sort of in line with the previous speakers as well, timing. So you might call it luck, you might call it timing. What I was trying to highlight is that because of the refugee crisis, because of the visibility of this crisis, there was a big funding coming from the EU, mostly to Turkey and some other humanitarian organization, to respond to this crisis. And I was lucky because of this timing, and I got this job as well. So education perfectly fits to the job I applied. And on top of that, it was the timing actually that helped me to secure this job. And I think to be explicit, I feel like that this is not the best time to pursue a humanitarian career because of the budget cuts. Now I'm interviewing with so many different aid organizations, and most of my friends, they were laid off actually. UNHCR, mostly USAID, and because of the budget cuts. So, I mean, maybe this is not so optimistic point, but yeah, luck and timing is also very influential. And the third part that I would like to highlight is that I wouldn't say it's my advice, but what I would like to highlight is that I speak a little bit French, and I strongly advise to learn any other language other than the English. It might be French. I mean, United Nations has 6 different official languages. So it can be Spanish, it can be Arabic as well. And I speak a little bit French, and I also took courses Arabic as well. Even at the UN, they really want you to attend like freely to have these kind of language courses as well. I would advise that. I think if I were you, I would certainly learn Arabic, for instance. People think that since I'm Turkish, I do speak Arabic, but I don't. So I think this brought me to the third point that I would like to highlight, the language. Language is really important. And the last part that I would like to talk about what I was doing at the World Food Program. So yes, it was very much linked to do what I studied, peace and security studies. So because every week, so you need to write report to the management. What was going on in the northwestern part of Syria, whether or not it might have an impact on our operations because of the safety of our programs and projects as well. So I used, I would say, some sort of my communication skills that I have gained during my education. But the last part that I would like to highlight is that because it's also linked to how I got another job after the World Food Program is linked to the fact that being a team player. Now we are living in an age of AI. Yes, it's good to have these kind of hard skills. I think you also highlight soft skills, which I totally believe that being a team player is one of the most, I think, important skill now the sector is in need of. What I mean by saying like a good team player is that because all these jobs like World Food Program, UNDP, it is not something that you do it by yourself. So for instance, in the cross-border operations, I mean, sometimes I really found it very challenging because we had to sign a paper before closing the final door of this track. We all ensure that this only consists like humanitarian assistance, 6 different people coming from all over the world, like from, I remember Nepal, Congo, Turkish. Sometimes it's really so difficult to have a common understanding and ground. Even it's very simple, it sounds simple, basic, but there was always some sort of a conflict among us, like UN officials. But what I'm saying is that, yes, good to have these kind of hard skills in terms of what you know, these kind of skills. But beyond that, I think it's very important to be a good team player, to get along with other colleagues, which is also linked to the emotional intelligence as well, because we are living in an HI. Now I was checking as well, because I was contributing to those, which is called situational reports as well, published by the World Food Program. Now, actually, I will say that I don't know how it works now in the sector, but AI, so many different chatbots, they produce, I will say, as good as we did at this time. So I will say that these skills might be maybe much more in need. So this also concludes all of the points that I have highlighted, but I'm happy to answer during Q&A session. Thanks for your attention.
So we'll open it up now. So if anybody has any questions, yeah, please just put your hand up, and we'll also check online after a first round of questions in the room. And just briefly say who you are before you ask the question. And so yeah, I'll open up the floor.
My name's Haiti. I'm final year HCRI. And Ahmed, you mentioned that you taught yourself about program management before you applied for a position about that. But I was wondering like how you managed to do that.
Well,
Was it a course online?
Okay, so I answer now. or-
Yeah.
Okay. So in program management in general, you have different methodology for different sectors. So, for example, the private sector may use a specific methodology. The public sector use a specific one, but development and humanitarian they use only one. It's called log frame. You can search for it. Log frame. So you can like acquire these skills yourself. Program management through the log frame methodology. So you can do it, but also I had my degree on it, but also it's part of self-learning that I do.
Any other questions?
I have a simple one for Hannah. You mentioned emergency planning qualifications, and I was just wondering sort of what those qualifications look like, what they are.
Yeah, please come in, Hannah. We'll take questions one at a time for now.
Yeah, so most emergency planning qualifications, formal emergency planning qualifications, they used to come from the Emergency Planning College, which is based in York, but I think they had online courses as well. That recently went through a rebrand, I think, about this time last year, that's now the UK Resilience Academy. And if you go onto their website, they have a couple of e-learning courses, which is just sort of like generic information. But then they do have more specific, more formal qualifications as well. Ones that are specific to like risk management and business continuity, some that are to do with tactical or strategic emergency management, debriefing, working with communities, that sort of stuff. But those are paid for. As I say, they are expensive courses, and so getting opportunities that allow you to pursue qualifications, obviously through work, is obviously the ideal. But they are looking at embedding more qualifications into that sphere. As Nieve alluded to, there is a lot more push from the government about professionalizing emergency planning as its own sort of profession. So they've released the national occupational standards, and now they're looking at these training programs. So I think there is more and more on the way. They're also looking at graduate apprenticeships and things like that in emergency planning. So I've got my fingers crossed that there will be more opportunities within that side of the emergency response sector in the coming years, hopefully.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Hannah. Do we have any other questions in the room?
First of all, thank you for your presentation. I'm Zeynep, and I'm studying Masters in Global Development. So my question is to Dr. Ümit Seven. I was wondering if you could elaborate more on your job at NATO, like in which stage of your career that came up, or like what kind of a job was it?
Thanks, Zeynep, for the question. So I was in Afghanistan with NATO in 2011. I served there for 1 year. This was a job related to NATO forces in Kabul. So I mean, my official title was aide de camp. This is a French term, some sort of executive assistant for the highest general in Kabul. So I was nominated by the Turkish government. So I was selected by the Turkish government, and then I was working with NATO forces as well. But this was totally different. But what I would like to highlight is that during this time, I realized that because first time in my life, I went to a refugee camp in Kabul, in the outskirts of Kabul, and this abject poverty, like it was really so, I would say, influential. It was for me so emotional to see this kind of a poverty, to this kind of people in need, like schools. I mean, when you imagine like a school, you feel like that it contains some sort of a roof like doors, but I think this is totally in contrast with what you imagine when I refer to school. In there, I realized that actually, no, it is just a tree and then a little bit shade, and this is how they call it school. So I think this is, I would say, I would like to highlight. Yes, I was nominated by Turkish government, and then I was there working for NATO, and then I decided that do something more humanitarian, and this is the reason why I worked with UN and some ICMPD as well, and now I'm doing my own project at HCRI as well, mostly related to humanitarian assistance as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So I've got another one. I realised I didn't introduce myself as well. I'm Aidan, second year Global Development Institute student. Just to follow on from that question, I have some limited military experience, and I'm now looking to go into the humanitarian sector. I was just wondering what were the main sort of differences for you, sort of between working for NATO and working for the World Food Programme and other humanitarian sector charities.
Thanks, Ed. I think this is, I would say, one of the topics that have been widely discussed by different organizations as well, because I will say that maybe in the early years of the professional humanitarianism, most of the aid workers, they were mostly soldier turned aid workers. So I would say that, but now this is not the case anymore. I would also add that there was some sort of a reaction towards more recruiting people who had some sort of a military background as well, because these are two very different domains, two different fields. Even though I say so, I will say that in some fields, still, I think it's very overlapping, such as humanitarian demining. I was also in Turkey. We were clearing some mines, especially in the Iraqi border and Iranian border as well. Most of the people that work within this team, they were former military officers as well. But on the other hand, I would say that now, yeah, to be honest, there's some sort of reaction to recruit more professional soldiers, but it's also linked to how you navigate your career. Because I studied first and foremost aviation, which was totally different. And then I studied politics, more on, I would say, humanitarian thing. This is how I ended up, I would say, ending up as an aid worker at World Food Programme and UNDP. So I hope this clarifies. But yeah, I mean, what I want to say is that like MSF, DRC, they have also some sort of humanitarian demining. Maybe this might be an also entry point if you are considering applying these kind of organizations.
Do we have any questions online?
Yeah, we have a question for Hannah about final year geography student who has experiencing GIS through a couple of modules, and they want to know, based on your experience, maybe your knowledge of others in the humanitarian sector, would this be enough to get into the humanitarian sector in terms of doing GIS related work, or would specializing further via doing a GIS master's be better?
It's always a toss-up, isn't it? Based on my experience is always going to be more valuable. So if you've been doing GIS work through a couple of your modules, or you've been using it through your dissertation, if you've got opportunities to use it for something practical, now whether that be on a voluntary basis or doing some intern or shadowing work with an organization, actually use it in practice, I think that's probably more valuable. But what you tend to see in a lot of the application processes for organizations like this is that it's either a master's in X, Y, and Z or equivalent experience. And I think if you're choosing between two people and somebody's got more experience actually using it, they are going to be a more valuable candidate. But if you've got no experience using it in practice, then actually the person who has the master's degree is probably going to be offered the job. So it's always a balance, but I think if you can find ways to actually use it in practice, that's going to be more valuable for you later on in your career.
Thank you, Hannah. Any other questions? Hi, Gwen.
Hi, my name's Boaden. I'm a third year at the MHR student. You've all pretty much highlighted the importance of soft skills. My question is pretty much the heavy one. What kind of skill have you had kind of outside the traditional learning in lectures and in your education that proved to be really valuable when starting out in your careers?
Good questions. Anybody want to jump in?
Yeah, I
Go.
can sort of say it. So Hannah did sort of touch on it before, but I'd say it's that eagerness and being ready to learn. And I know that might not seem a very useful answer, but having gone through the recruitment process myself and then also with multiple teams trying to recruit into the job, sometimes if you're showing that you're passionate and that you're eager to learn, that will sometimes trump somebody, even if they do have slightly more experience to you, but they don't seem eager to learn, because that eagerness and that excitement to get into whichever sector you're talking about, that can't be taught. Anybody can learn, anybody can sort of pick up a book and learn the job, whether that be prior to or on the job itself. But that eagerness and that willingness to sometimes go over the top and go beyond, that can't be taught. So I'd say that's one of the things that we always look out for and something that's been noted as a very key asset.
Thank you. Hannah, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I've got a good one for this, actually. It's something that my most valuable lesson in the whole sector, I think, and it was in a lecture, but it wasn't in a lecture, if you know what I mean. So when I was in my third year, I took a module with Fatum looking at systemic approaches to disaster management. And one of the projects that we had to do was we had to pull together a humanitarian consultancy project, a 15-minute presentation, and we spent hours on it as a group. We put in all the fancy diagrams, we got the right stats, we were looking in policy documents, we spent ages on it. We get to the lecture to present, walk up already, we all just dressing really smart, trying to like make a good impression for ourselves. And he was like, right, do it in 5 minutes. And we're all looking at each other going, sorry? What do you mean? We've had 15 minutes to prep this. Like we've got 20 slides, we've got all of, no, I want it in 5 minutes. And I think that was probably the clearest lesson that I've taken through in the last few years of working in this sector, is that 95% of the time you are talking to people who don't have the time, the resource, or the interest in what you're doing. Even if you are incredibly passionate about the work that you're doing and your team is incredibly passionate and you're doing lots of work both out of passion and interest and need, the people who are going to be able to make the decisions as to what gets you a job, what projects you're allowed to work on, what funding you get next year, are the people that have 5 minutes that you need to catch them because they're walking on the way to their meeting, or they postpone your meeting twice because they've got things that are higher up on the priority list, or somebody is shouting louder about. So the ability to be able to confidently persuade members of senior management to condense what is quite a complicated topic to somebody in a short format is something, it's a skill that you are forced to develop as soon as you step out of those university doors. And so I think it was a really striking one for me that I've absolutely taken forward as a soft skill.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. Ahmed, anything you wanted to add?
Just to adding up what you have already highlighted, I would like to highlight the communications. I think it's also linked to your point and Hannah's point as well. I will say that universities, I think one of the most important objective is to learn how to learn. And this is the skill that you might transfer or you might carry from university to the job that you have it. Because I mean, no one's expert in the job that we initially start. So you need to know how to learn. And this is also linked to the communication in the sense that in this kind of organization, first and foremost, I would say United Nations, it's a complex system, meaning that, yes, there's a technical aspect, but it is a very social organization, meaning that you interact with people within the organization, but beyond that, you interact, you engage with those people who are in need. So you need to know how to communicate your work, your needs, your eagerness. I think persuasion is also a part of it. So I think communication, I will say that this is something that I would strongly advise to focus on.
Maybe just one last thing, like besides what you're having, I mean, like a degree, you could like acquire some new knowledge that will help you in the sector. And one of this, for example, is the language. As Ahmed mentioned, the French is really important. Like I remember in my mission in Niger and Haiti, my team was 50% because we didn't have French speaker. That is very important. Other skills that you can, or knowledge that you can start learning. Applied security is really important. I don't say like, I don't mean like the global humanitarian acceptance that you're learning from your course, but applied security, how to apply the security in humanitarian mission, and you can acquire it. Other things, supply chain management. That is really important in humanitarian sector. And for sure, program management. I think these skills or knowledge you can acquire either yourself through self-learning or through additional courses, which you didn't have properly in your humanitarian degree.
Brilliant. We're almost out of time. Just any final questions? No, well, let's wrap up then, and let's end with another huge thanks to all of our participants. Okay, so we've got a coffee and cake break now, and then we'll come back for the second session. Andrew, are they just out here?
No, it's ground.
Ground floor. Okay.